Mercedes changed how they build their race car and it made things better. But it's clear that this isn't enough to help them win races yet. But the team knows this after they did really well in Barcelona, and they're planning a big new car upgrade. That's going to face some tough challenges because their competitors also want to prove that. Mercedes doing well in Barcelona with their W14 car was just a lucky one-time thing. Will we see Mercedes get second place in the team championship easily with their newest upgrade package at Silverstone, after saying they were wrong for the past year and a half? Mercedes has gotten much better at making their car fast, and they were able to get both their drivers on the winner's platform in Barcelona. They got 33 points from that race weekend, which is the most this season for the team. This put them in a good spot ahead of Aston Martin. But if there's one thing we know from Mercedes' recent races, it's that the car design is nowhere near finished, and there's lots of work to be done on a part of the car that we don't get to see very often, and that's the bottom part called the floor. For things to be scary for Mercedes, there are two big problems working against making the W14 better: the spending limit challenge and Aston Martin's newest upgrades in Canada. So we'll talk about these two main problems and explain Mercedes' view of the situation. Bringing a huge upgrade package is hard work that before 2021 would have been thought of as normal, since every team could spend whatever money they needed to make their car as fast as possible. Of course, you need the team to have enough money for this to happen. But ever since the spending limit was brought to the F1 world, teams have been limited in how much they can spend. But Mercedes says they've spent a huge amount of money on their newest upgrade package. This was expected because of how big the package is. You can't bring new side parts, floor and front parts without spending lots of the $135 million. They're allowed to use dots still. It looks like the floor isn't in its final form, which is definitely good news for Mercedes because they were able to see the bottom of the Red Bull RB19 car after Perez's car was lifted up in the air in Monaco. Allison said that the engineers at their factory are now paying lots of attention to all the small details that make the RB19 such a powerful machine. But this is definitely something that could help or hurt the team, because even though they're planning to bring a new floor that the car gets 40% of its total grip from, copying something as successful as the RB19's floor is a challenge that might be impossible to make work on your own car. For example, the main body difference is way too big between these two cars. And Wolff said that if they had enough money, the first thing the team would do is change the main body of the W14. But let's not talk about what might happen and go to what's really happening right away. The first challenge for Mercedes would be staying within the spending limit. While I doubt they'd be very upset if they went over it, given how well Red Bull did after they were found guilty of doing the same thing, the punishments for going over the limit will probably change, since the Austrian team wasn't made an example of about this issue. Still, Andrew Shavlin, the trackside engineer for Mercedes, talked about how big the newest philosophy change in the car is and which part costs the most money. He said basically they made new suspension parts, and suspension costs a lot of money to make and put on the car. So with the spending limit, they're always looking at their situation in this World Championship. They don't know how many things they're going to do and don't expect to make huge jumps. But the most important problem that Mercedes has solved is they found the right way to make the W14 work. And from this point it can only get better. Why George Russell is very excited for what's coming next, especially at Silverstone, where it makes the most sense for Mercedes to bring their next upgrade package because the track is close to their factory in Brackley. But it's worth saying that Mercedes isn't the only team out there trying their best to fix the ongoing problems with their car, as Aston Martin has yet to bring their biggest package so far this season, their first one too. When talking about this, car racing experts guessed that the floor of the AMR23 will see a new version of it being put on in Montreal. If we've learned one thing about the AMR-23, it's that it's very similar to the Red Bull team, which then again shows that having similar main bodies could let them put on a floor as similar as possible to the one the Austrian team is using right now, making the performance as good as possible. Ferrari is also expecting good performance in Montreal because Barcelona was called the worst track that the team could have brought an upgrade package to, from both teams and experts. This leaves Mercedes with no choice but to try to make their game even better. While they do have the smart information to do this, the money restrictions are something that could make it harder to develop the W14, but that doesn't mean they'll just give up and wait until the end of the season to try something new for the 2024 campaign. This is something that Ferrari did halfway through last season. Mercedes also thought that before the Barcelona race, they wouldn't make it in the top 10 for the race, and look where they finished. Obviously, Montreal is going to be hard for them and they'd be happy to take anything the track gives them. But when it comes to Silverstone, the Silver Arrows are going to be asked twice whether they'll just sit back and watch other teams win the glory on their home track. This was the track that basically saw the W13's bouncing problem being solved completely, with the first steps being made earlier in the season in Barcelona. So what exactly is Mercedes bringing to Silverstone? When talking about this, Russell said yes, Silverstone, they're excited for it. He thinks they'll be in a good place there to fight for a good result. They might have a couple more things coming for Silverstone, but they need to not get too carried away with just one good result. The team has done an amazing job bringing these upgrades. He thinks Aston and Ferrari probably didn't do as well as they could have in the race that day. So let's see what the next race brings, but definitely a great step forward. As mentioned earlier in this video, the floor of the car is something that will be worked on closely, and this has been confirmed by the old and new technical boss of the team, James Allison. But he also stressed how important the car-specific parts are, meaning that just because the complex floor works on the RB9 overall car structure, it doesn't mean it could be put on the W14 and expected to do wonders. Russell thinks the same way too, as he jokingly said that even if you get the no-pod side design and put it on the current version of the RB19, the Austrian team would still be the fastest one. So the question of where Mercedes should look for more speed is answered with one simple word: the floor. And it's not just Russell and Allison who think the bottom of the car needs to be changed. Toto Wolff is also not convinced that the side pod design should stay the way it is, as he pushed the team to look for more improvements from down below, while everyone was focused on what could be seen with our eyes. Mercedes could very well go with yet another change in the side pod design, as they weren't even allowed to see a downwash ramp of the W1 for a well-known F1 reporter. Christian Meneth talked about Wolff's disagreement with the side pod design, and when talking about this he said, "What is a concept?" You've heard that question from the Mercedes engineers quite a lot. They're talking to Andrea Stella, and he was talking about side pods and why these wide side pods work better with this generation of cars and bring the best out of the floor. Because everyone is talking about the floor. Overall, the most important thing that Mercedes is taking away from this whole situation is that, while they've made huge progress with the newest design of the car, lots more things need to be changed so they'll be able to fight for wins and championships. The good thing is that both of their drivers are now ready to stay with the team for a couple more years. And with Mick Schumacher's help in testing the car and seeing what's wrong with it, the future looks bright for Mercedes. The only question that needs to be answered right now is whether the short-term future like Silverstone will see Mercedes become competitive enough to use their 17 extra wind tunnel time to close the gap to Red Bull, or will they head into yet another season of collecting information and try to do things right from day one next year.